Okay, so let's talk finally about the seven. The seven's going to be the last number in the headspace that we're going to be talking about here. The sin of the seven is gluttony, and the virtue is joy. And let me explain how these serve as opposites. Because joy, what we mean by joy, includes this aspect of having a contentment in where you are in life, with what you have, with what you're doing, with who you are. True joy absolutely includes that, right? Because it's not dependent on your circumstances the way like happiness is. That's how we separate joy and happiness. Happiness is very circumstantial. Joy has this underlying current of inevitability, of continual contentment in someone. So, gluttony then, if you think about what gluttony is, in this need to consume and do everything and experience everything all at once, immediately, it is actually a lack of contentment in what you have. It's this sense of a need to experience and consume as much as possible because I might not have enough. And that's really at the heart of what is going on in the sin of gluttony. So that's how it is the opposite then of joy as its virtue. Okay, so the head orientation for the seven. The seven reacts to fear, which is the overall sin of the head. All of the head spaces, as we've been saying, have fear. Unlike the five, who reacts to that fear by avoiding what's causing them the fear. And notice that what's causing a five the most fear is the lack of resources, as we said. So they're going to be used up. They're going to give too much of themselves away. So they react to that by running, by hiding, by withholding themselves. The six is going to react to, the six is primarily noticing the chaos and the unpredictability of the world, and that's setting off their fear. And then the six is going to react to that by building some system, building something that they can rely on, and then over-relying on it, being overly trustful at times in certain things. The seven is going to experience fear primarily as a lack of resources, not within themselves, but externally. They're going to say, I don't have enough. There's more I could have, there's more I could do. Thus, what you're going to see in a seven is that they're going to react to any amount of fear that they experience. Any little bit of evidence that suggests that the world is not as it should be, that they are not who they should be, they are going to absolutely refuse to accept that. And they are going to avoid it, not through withdrawing the way a five does, but with a complete, fun-loving, let's do it all. We're going to see everything. We're going to do everything in the world. That's how they're going to avoid the fear that they're experiencing deep down. They're going to run from it, right? A five is going to hide, in a sense. A six is going to build a scaffolding around it so they can't see it. That's how the six is going to block their view of the fear by building large structures around their lives. And the seven is just going to run. The seven's going to put their head down and they're going to run away from the fear. And they're going to avoid it that way. The sevens thus have a very, very intense need to avoid anything that feels like pain, anything that feels like fear. Because to them, pain feels like fear. Because it reminds them that they're not who they should be, that the world's not as it should be. Pain is going to be the main way they experience that, and they're not going to want it. They're not going to want any kind of pain, any kind of bad news. Do not give sevens any kind of bad news. They're not here for it. They're done. They're done with you. They're done with it. They have something better to do than to sit around and listen to you talk about sad stories. The 7 tends to embrace the unlimited possibilities of life. They are eternal optimists, the 7s. Why? Because they really believe that the world deep down is a perfect, amazing place? No. The opposite is true, right? This is their overcompensation. We've talked about with all the numbers, their point of overcompensation. Here's a big one for the 7. No, the 7, deep down in a place that they rarely have access to, down within them, they know that the world is not great. They know the world's not as it should be, but that leads to pain. That pain reminds them of their fear. They're not having it. They're not all about that life. They are going to cover up that reality with an eternal optimism. They're just going to refuse to believe that anything could go wrong and happen that could be bad. They have this insatiable desire then, this extreme passion for positive, energizing experiences that will help them cover up this reality that they're trying to avoid and they're trying to run away from. This helps them to escape any kind of feeling of emptiness and any kind of feeling of pain in their lives. Thus, what 7s have to really, really be careful of, they really, really, every number has several things that they need to be careful of, right? And the 7s are no different. They have several things. But one of the things that 7s really need to be cautious about, and of course, even as I describe this, you can hear the 6 in me coming out, right? And telling, be more cautious, be more safe. You'll start to recognize patterns in how people characterize things due to their number. But for a 7, they must be careful with the gluttony that they're experiencing the world through. They must not be overcome by addiction. Addiction is very, very common in 7s. It's a big problem for many 7s. They also tend to be adventure seekers. They tend to need to, not to say like everyone who enjoys like skydiving or base jumping or things like that are 7s, but 7s do tend to enjoy those kinds of things as well. So there are other numbers that would also like to do those for different reasons, right? The motivation though here is anytime I'm experiencing something so adventurous as a 7, it will be a distraction for me. I can distract myself from the pain and the emptiness that I feel inside and I see outside of me in the world. 7s are charmers. They really are. They're able to charm and woo other people. 7s can get themselves into a lot of trouble in the way that they interact with the world, in their adventure seeking, in their just huge levels of consumption of the world. But 7s can tend to get themselves out of trouble very well because they tend to be very enigmatic, charismatic kinds of people. And so they're having such a good time at all times. 7s are so fun-loving, and they just experience the world, and they want to do everything, and that's fun to be around. And to be in the presence of a 7, it's very easy to be charmed by them, to be wooed by how much fun that they seem to be having all the time. And so that helps to get them out of trouble a lot of times. Not necessarily to their benefit, right? Because sometimes trouble is not a bad thing. And even 7s wouldn't want to hear that, but I think it's true. Sevens can be seen as emotionally shallow and flighty. It is very, very hard to pin a 7 down and to have a serious conversation about their emotions, what they're feeling, what they're going through, because that feels like you're treading pretty close to pain at this point. No way. I'm not all about talking about my feelings. What if my feelings are sad? What if my feelings are fearful? I'm not gonna sit down and talk to you about that. So emotions are difficult, and the flightiness, because their primary goal as a 7 is to distract yourself from the emptiness and the pain of the world. They tend to look very scattered. 1 second they're over here reading a book, you go like 15 seconds over to where they just were and they're gone. And you're like, where'd they go? Oh, now they're playing video games. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll sit down and play video games with you for a couple of hours. No. I'm not going to play for a couple of hours. I'm going to go over here and go run over to Quick Trip to grab something to drink. And then I'm coming back. They're just like, they're here and there and everywhere. They're doing it all. 95 miles an hour is the way they live their life. A funny story is when we were going through the Enneagram the first time as a staff, when I first was hired at Lakeland, as the person who was teaching us about the Enneagram was describing the 7, they said, a funny thing about a 7 is they're probably already bored by the time we've gotten to describing the 7 with what we're doing. And so if you turn and you look, the 7 is probably not even in their seat where they used to be. And we knew that we had a 7 on staff, and we were laughing, and we turned to kind of rib the 7 on staff and say, ha ha, what he just said about you, and we noticed that he really was gone. He really had left. He had gotten bored already with what was going on, and he had found something more fun to do. The 7 is always going to lean toward whatever feels more fun to them, because that's the way they distract themselves. And so if in that moment, sitting and listening to someone describe all these numbers in really full detail didn't seem fun to a 7, they're not going to sit there and just experience it if they don't think it's fun. They're gone. They're going to go do something else that feels a lot more fun to them. So they can definitely feel flighty and scattered and hard to pin down, very hard to pin down. They can be very fascinated with other people's lives, and this is very charming, and this feels very, very charismatic, and it feels fun to be around them because they might at times feel very interested in you and what you're doing. I will tell you, it's not because they love you in and of yourself, and it's not because they actually find you, the real you, fascinating. What they're really doing is they're trying to poke and prod you for new fun ideas that maybe they've never thought of before. They would like a new strategy for running away from the pain of the world, a new strategy for distracting themselves, and maybe you have figured out something that they've never done before, and that might be fun. And so that's really why they are so interested in you, is they want to figure out what you might be doing that they might want to do themselves. Relationships can be very, very difficult for 7s. It can be very difficult to be really good friends with a 7. I know this from experience, and some of this might be my own 6ness, because I want to be very attached to a good friend. I want to feel very loyal to them. I want them to feel very loyal to me. The 7 in friendships feel so flighty to some of the other numbers. They feel so hard to pin down. They're the kind of people that if you say, hey, do you want to get together next week to hang out? They'll be like, next week? I don't even know what I'm doing next hour. Like, there's no way I can commit to doing something with you next week. They're going to feel very last minute in planning of things, and it's going to be very, very hard sometimes to get them to feel like they're keeping their word. They might commit to something. They might say, yeah, I'll hang out with you next week. And then it comes time to do something, and they send you a very last minute text that says, hey, sorry, something else came up. I'm not going to be able to hang out today. And that can be, for some of the other numbers, that can be very hurtful. And so relationships with sevens, friendship relationships can be very difficult. But not only friendships, romantic relationships with sevens are also very difficult. Because a seven never, ever wants to feel pinned down. They never want to feel caged and locked up. Because anytime that they get captured, someone grabs them and holds them down long enough, they might slow down and stop for too long to where they actually have to face the reality of the pain and the emptiness that they are feeling deep down inside of them. So that's why they're rolling stones, they're wild animals. They need to be here, there, and everywhere, distracting themselves with something new every minute. And sometimes romantic relationships, this is not universally true, but it can tend to be true that sevens will balk at being forced into a committed relationship. A lot of times, after a couple of months of dating someone, it'll feel too constrictive, and they'll have to run to something else, something new, something fun. Sometimes sevens even realize this about themselves, and it can be a really difficult thing for them to navigate because they might really love someone. They might really find someone who feels perfect for them, and they just realize, like, I don't think I can stop. I can't slow down. I can't commit to this because it feels constrictive. It feels restrictive. It feels like I'm in a cage if I don't have the world of options still open to me, that I can go any direction that I want to go. They never, ever, to kind of solidify and drive this point home, they never want to feel trapped. If you tell a seven they can't do something, it is going to drive them insane. They are not going to react positively to you telling them you can't do that because you have now limited their options, which limits their strategies to distracting themselves from the pain of the world. Sevens can be great initiators. And what I mean by that is they are, we talked about the 6 being the dream killer. 7 is the dreamer. Sevens think of new ideas all day long. Their whole life is thinking of a new idea. They want to change the way they're doing things every minute of their lives if they could, as this strategy for distraction. So they will be very good on planning teams. You should have a 7 on your idea, your creative planning, your planning meeting team, because 7s are going to constantly think of fun new ways to do things and different ways of attacking problems and issues and projects. 7s, however, tend to be very, very poor and very, very inconsistent at finishing problems or ideas. They are not good executors of the ideas that they've come up with. If you're going to use one of their ideas, that you probably really should not make them the project manager, because they might get bored with it and they might go in a different direction the next week, even the next day. They might be like, yeah, that was fun. That was a fun idea, but it's time for me to think of something new. I'm not gonna spend months and months trying to execute this plan and make this thing happen. That's not fun. That slows me down. That keeps me from being able to distract myself. This is like they're not conscious of this idea that I must distract myself, right? It feels just like having fun to them. It's not till they dig down into a deeper layer that they realize that fun is distraction. Fun equals distraction. That's why they're so intensely looking for fun at all times. Okay, let's talk about growth for the 7. 7s must, at some point, lean into the sobriety and the stability of life. They must allow themselves to be slowed down for long enough to realize it's okay It's okay to face the world. It's okay to face your own pain and your own emptiness that you've been fearing and you've been running from this whole time. A couple of verses here. Someone volunteer to read Luke chapter 10, verse 39 out loud. And then someone else volunteer to read Luke chapter 15. This is a long one. I don't know why I gave such a long one. Verses 12 through 20. And you can go ahead and stop this video and read those out loud. You can do that now. Okay. So now that you're back, let's talk about helping a 7. A 7, in order to feel safe, you have to kind of start with presenting them with their options. You don't want to restrict them. So you want to begin by giving them options to choose from and making them feel like they have a lot of different directions that they can go. In this way, you are anticipating with them fun and exciting possibilities, fun and exciting things. Within that safe structure, then, how you can most help a 7 is then allow them to be serious and sober. Give them encouragement to actually, that it's okay to face the world and to face the darkest recesses of yourself. You don't have to constantly distract yourself away from that. You'll be able to go into that place and still be okay. You'll still be safe. You do not have to fear it. Another interesting thing that 7s have told me, specifically, that they feel like is helpful for people to know about them, is they often feel like others over-rely on them for joy in other people's lives. In other words, if a 7 ever does have a moment of sobriety, a moment where they're not just going and fun, and live, YOLO, which tends to be what 7s are like. If they ever have a moment that's not like that, they feel like other people are like, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Oh no, you're not yourself. You're not being yourself. Is there a problem? And so this gets them in a dangerous cycle where they feel like they can't be sober. They can't be serious about something because people are going to feel like, oh no, something must be wrong with you. You're not being yourself. You're not your typical fun-loving self. And so don't over-rely on them for that joy, and give them the space and the ability to be sober at times if they're leaning in that direction. Okay, that's it. Same as always. Take a few minutes to talk about the 7. Does this sound like you? Does this feel like you? Is this something that resonates with you? Shoot me some questions about this if it didn't make sense. Are there other people in your life that you feel like this might be? And what did you learn? What did you learn from the 7s and the headspace in general? The different ways that the 5, the 6, and the 7 deal with the fear that they're experiencing in the world at all times. Okay, I'm sorry that I couldn't be here to teach this in person, as we've been talking about also with the Bible study, but I'm glad we could make these videos, and I hope this was at least helpful to you, and we'll be back next week to talk about the next step, which will be talking about wings and integration and disintegration. Can't wait. Hope you guys have had a good week, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.